Okay, can folks see my screen now?
I think it's loading.
Okay. Maybe let me know if it
There we go.
goes. Okay. All right, fantastic. So yeah, so thank you very much, Robbie. Really honored that folks wanted to hear me talk about this topic. I think you did a good job describing my background, kind of wearing my ex-FDA hat the most here. At MICRA, I do mostly biocompatibility now, which is a technical area within regulatory. But I got help from some colleagues to, I think, make this what it needs to be. So we'll stretching my knowledge just a little bit, but I have done some of this before while I was at FDA. So let's talk through what is a medical device. Um, okay, I advanced the slides. Is there a delay or can you see it already?
We can see it.
Okay, great. So let's see here. I think we did a pretty good introduction, so I'll go through the intro fast. We'll do the medical device definition. We'll do some case examples of what basically interesting products that may or may not be a medical device. Then we'll talk a little more about software and general wellness, which is a kind of a tricky area. And then we'll jump to a final case example of a smartwatch, which I think is a kind of a microcosm of what is a medical device. And we'll have some concluding statements. Okay. I think we already covered most of my background. If anyone knows FDA pretty well, these acronyms will show where I used to sit at FDA. I was a vascular and endovascular devices reviewer. I'm also showing in the lower left, my colleague Alex Cadat is also former FDA. I borrowed some of his slides, and this morning, while I was in the airport for some travel, I was sending him a bunch of messages trying to get some better insight on smartwatches and general wellness. So um, I think it makes sense now, but we can talk through it. All right. So, as a first foundational piece of information, it's good to know that devices were not always regulated. So, there's a number of laws that passed that kind of led up to devices being regulated the way they are, and that impacts what is a device and what isn't a device. So the two biggest ones to note are in 1976, the Medical Device Amendments. So that law basically set up medical device regulation. Before that, medical devices were mostly unregulated, meaning that companies could just sell medical devices without any FDA oversight. So that changed in 1976. And then the other law here, we won't talk about it much in this talk, but MEDUFA, you might hear about that acronym. That's a unique agreement between FDA and industry, similar to an agreement between pharma and industry. There's also PDUFA, but those kind of set up. That's more about how to submit a medical device and how it's reviewed. We're going to be focusing on what is a medical device. So really the key law is 1976, plus there's also a new one called the 21st Century Cures Act, which we'll talk about too. Let's see here. I'm going to skip this one and just jump to what is a medical device. So I'm showing here, this is just a copy paste from the FD&C Act, which defines what a medical device is. And I'm going to advance one slide to show some emphasis because there's a lot of words here, but there's some key concepts of it that I want to emphasize. So first of all, a medical device is an instrument, apparatus, implement, et cetera, et cetera. Implant is another word in here. I underlined the word contrivance just to highlight a medical device can be almost anything. And this is one of the most, I think, interesting and confusing things about medical devices is it's more about what the device does and how it does it than what it's made of. That might make sense a little more later. So let's see here. Other things to emphasize.
Is it just me? I lost Rob. I don't see the screen anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Um,
Does
right.
not achieve.
Rob, we lost you.
You lost me? Oh,
Um,
oh my
we
God.
see you again. How about Robbie just can advance slides for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So can you hear me again?
Yeah, we can't hear you for now. Um, I'm going to go ahead and share PowerPoint.
Okay.
All right, this slide.
Yes. Perfect. So
And also Yana, if I'm doing this, Yana, can you moderate questions in the chat?
Will do.
Yeah, thank you.
okay. Okay, great. So did you hear, did I get to what is not a medical device yet?
No, so you said that, a medical device can, be almost anything. Um, and yeah, that's what I remember you saying.
Okay, I can go from there. So the next key concept is, I think maybe I'll just go off camera. That might help bandwidth. So the next thing to emphasize is what it's intended for. So there's this term intended use, which has its root in part from this definition. And that's another key emphasis that a medical device is used for diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. Another part of this definition is what is not a medical device. And that is anything where the primary intended purpose is through chemical action within the body and is not dependent on being metabolized. So does that sound like any other kind of product that is also regulated? Because I set that up as like a rhetorical question, but yeah, that's generally speaking, those are drugs. So we're saying medical devices are not drugs, but this comes up pretty often for some interesting products. And then the last piece of this is there's the 21st Century Cures Act, which I believe amends FD&C Act. Talks a little more about software, but I'm splitting that out into another section just because this is already a lot of information. So we'll talk about software later. And I think we're jumping right into case examples. Could we go to the next slide? Oh, okay. Intended use. So I just wanted to define this because it is a very ill-defined term, and it is important to understanding how to, what's a medical device. So the intended use is basically what a device is generally used for. So what kind of I don't know if this slide is actually the best at describing intended use, but I can maybe explain it through example. So let's take an angioplasty balloon, for example. That's used to open up blood vessels that are partly closed. So the intended use, what is it being used for? It's for angioplasty, which is opening up blood vessels. But then you've also got this umbrella is showing that the intended use is pretty broad. Then you've also got something called indications for use, which is more specifically what are you using this device for. And there are a large number of devices where they are pretty specific on who exactly this is for. So you can talk about a target patient group, a target user, used in a certain environment or an anatomical location. So for an angioplasty balloon, you could imagine cases where it's only for, say, patients with mild stenosis, meaning that it's the blood vessel is only mildly narrowed. So for severe cases, you'd use a different device. And for anatomical location, maybe it's just for peripheral arteries. It's not for the coronary arteries, which are higher risk and need a different size. So that's sort of how the indications for use really drills down to exactly which patients and what are the details of how you use this. Intended use tends to define a category of devices and a general kind of use for those products. Maybe I'll pause there. Does that make sense? Also, I'm willing to pause for questions on this concept just because I think it's a rich topic area, maybe kind of a tangential area. Not hearing anything. Anything in the chat? Or
No, nothing in the chat. I think it makes
okay.
sense. It probably becomes clearer with examples rather than.
Okay. Well, perfect. Let's go. Yeah, can we advance the slide? Oh, excuse me. All right, we'll jump right into the case example. Okay, so we're going to start with something that I think is complex product, but maybe straightforward. So a neurostimulator, you see the image here is of, they generally have two components, a pulse generator, so that's that kind of metallic can, and then it's got two leads coming out of it, and so those are going to generate, those are going to transmit electrical signals. Neurostimulators are often used, they're used for stimulation for various purposes. In this case, the indication for use is as an adjunctive therapy in reducing frequency of seizures in patients 18 years or older. And then there's some more stuff. So this is from a real case. I put the link in here as far as what the product is. So the question to the group is it a medical device? I'm not sure the best way in Zoom, especially in my interface, to poll the group. Do you have any suggestions, or should we just should we reveal? I don't know if.
I mean, my intuition is to say that it is a medical device.
We got one vote, medical device. Yeah, maybe chat's the best way to do it.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up, chat. So, okay.
Oh, we have 3, 4 yeses. I include myself as yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So we can advance. This is an animation to show the answer.
Yes.
The answer is yes. This is supposed to be the straightforward one. So actually, I realized that there is, I think electrical stimulation might be something to think about, because that is part of how it's how it's achieving its goal. But yeah, it is. So let's just keep going. They're going to get more nuanced.
Yeah.
So next, manual toothbrush is intended to remove adherent plaque and food debris from teeth to reduce tooth decay. Is this a medical device? Chat or thumbs up, thumbs down.
We have 2 no's.
Some no's. Okay.
1 yes.
Okay, nice.
2 yeses. A yes with a question mark.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag. Can we advance the slide one? So the answer is yes, but there are also devices or there's also products where it seems similar, but the answer is no. Can we advance one more, and you'll see. Sometimes the answer is just dictated by the regulator. This is definitely classified as a medical device. From a mechanism of action perspective, it's achieving its goal by physical means, so it's not chemical, it's not metabolized. I think where this becomes a medical device is what it's intended for. So, there's kind of a treatment of disease here. But I think it is vague. So this is kind of a tricky one, but it's often used as an example in this kind of course. So I think it's worth, scratching your head and wondering, is that really treating a disease or condition? But this is regulated as a medical device. Okay, thank you. So the next one, toothpaste. It aids in the prevention of cavities. We're just taking this from the tube. So this is actually, I pulled this just from image searching tubes of toothpaste. Helps prevent gingivitis, helps interfere with harmful effects of plaque associated with gingivitis. So is toothpaste a medical device? All right, seeing some no's. One is no because chemical. So I like that, showing some basis for the thinking there. I have a yes as well. Yes and no. I like these answers. Okay. Yeah, some comments on the claims or uses. Yeah, it doesn't sound that medical, or like that much treatment, but it is talking about. Well, yeah. So basically, it's. I think it's not obvious. Let's advance, and we'll get the answer. So it is a two-parter. In this case, these claims, it is a drug. Could you advance one more? So one of the quick hacks is see if there's a drug facts on the product, and there typically are on toothpastes. But interestingly, the active ingredient is fluoride. So I believe that some toothpastes are, and just to close the loop on that, the fluoride is chemically achieving its goals. You might argue that it's metabolized. I'm actually not sure on that one, but maybe metabolized to stabilize your teeth. Kind of stretching myself there, but it is regulated as a drug in this case. But let's, Ravi, can we do another slide advancement? So I believe some toothpaste may not be drugs. They may be personal care products, which are cosmetics by regulation. This is pulled from FDA's website. I think it's the devices group, a CDRH's website. So toothpaste is in this list of things that can be personal care products. So I think if it's a fluoride, if it's a toothpaste that does not have fluoride in it or any other, chemical that they have a claim associated with, I think it would be a cosmetic. I was hoping to confirm that, but it is kind of slower to confirm those things. So that's my guess. But I believe, yeah, so different claims, and it could be a cosmetic. All right, could we go to the next one? All right, so this is a two-parter. Mouthwash, two examples. I deleted the logos, but you might be able to guess which ones they are just from the look. So on the left, the claim or use is helps prevent and reduce plaque and gingivitis, kills 99.9% of bad breath germs. So let's start with that one. Is this a medical device? All right, seeing some no's. Active ingredients. Yeah, good points here. All right, let's advance, and we'll reveal what this one is. So no, so the no's were correct. It is a drug. It has active ingredients. In this case, everything that ends in an "ol," including methanol, these kill germs. So, and then it has a claim of anti-plaque or anti-gingivitis. So yeah, that is regulated as a drug. Now let's look at this other one here. dry mouth oral rinse. This one is actually a device. This one, I actually worked on this while I was at FDA. There is interest in, having less regulation of this, but this is considered artificial saliva, so it relieves discomfort. And the reason that it's a device is because it's physically lubricating the inside of the mouth. It's not actually doing anything chemical. So it's kind of an interesting one. All right, let's advance to the next one. So here, drug-coated balloon. This is also, I described an angioplasty balloon already. This would be a drug-coated angioplasty balloon. So you see the image here. This balloon goes up through one of your blood vessels. Then the balloon is expanded to open up a narrowing in the blood vessel. So it's indicated for percutaneous transluminal angioplasty. So that's the technical term. Reopening a narrowed blood vessel after appropriate vessel preparation. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, like what kind of narrowings this treats. And then not really listed in this indication is it is coated with a drug. So the question, and these are called DCBs, they're pretty common. So is this a medical device? Is it? It's kind of a trick question, but let's see what people say. I'm seeing some yeses. A more detailed answer, which I think was probably leading to how this is regulated. Let's advance the slide. So yes-ish. This is pretty much a medical device. If you're going to say, like, is it or is it not a device? Technically, this is a combination product. So those are products that are more than one thing. But what's really interesting here is it's regulated mainly by CDRH, the devices group. So they are responsible for this product, and then they consult out to the drugs group to evaluate the drug component. So this is discussed more in combination products. It's like a whole other area, but you have to identify what's the primary mechanism of action, and that typically becomes who regulates this product primarily. The answer to which is the primary, it's physically opening the artery. And then secondarily, the drug prevents the artery from closing back up, months down the road. And so there's an argument to say, well, the bigger effect is opening up the blood vessel. There's actually a pretty rich area of discussion on the decision tree for combination products, but that's kind of the gist of it for why it's more of a medical device than a drug, but it is both. All right, and then moving to the smartwatch. This is just a preview. So this is a picture of the Apple Watch, just as one of the best examples that people recognize. To answer this question, we want to do some more slides talking about software and general wellness products. So let's advance to the next one. So I'm actually I'll just talk about this high level. We're not going to read all of this, but the 21st Century Cures Act was passed by Congress in 2016, and this gave some more clarification on medical device software regulation. So I have a bunch of slides here that are screenshots. The main point of this is to highlight that this really explains, it gives carve-outs for saying certain software doesn't count as a medical device. So I highlighted shall not include as one of the key terms here. And then the listing includes a bunch of things that FDA does not want to regulate as devices and like softwares that FDA does not want to regulate as devices. For example, administrative support for healthcare facility. Letter B is where we're going to talk more about general wellness, but letter B says for maintaining or encouraging healthy lifestyle and is unrelated to diagnosis, cure, mitigation, prevention, or treatment of disease or condition. And then a bunch of other carve-outs, things like clinical decision support is a gray area. But yeah, I think maybe we can do is skip through until we get past, I have a couple of these slides, and just get to the next topic. Here we go. So I mentioned general wellness products. There's actually a whole FDA guidance document on this, and it's super interesting. I was chatting with my colleague this morning. So this is just this language is taken from the guidance, but they're saying a general wellness product is, so it has an intended use of maintaining or encouraging a general state of healthy activity, or it relates the role of a healthy lifestyle with helping to reduce the risk or impact of chronic disease, where it's well understood, basically, that being healthy in that way can reduce, can improve your health outcomes there. So, if you think about it, you can kind of get where they're going. But the guidance goes a step farther, and it kind of says, well, first let's talk about this language here. So policy on low risk general wellness products. So CRH is the devices group, and they're saying they don't want to have to review all of these. The general thinking is the risk is low, and it's a lot of work to regulate these for both FDA and the industry. So interesting, they're saying devices group at FDA doesn't even want to know if they're medical devices, whether they comply with medical device requirements. So it's kind of like they're saying we don't, it's a moot point whether it's a device or not. We just don't want to regulate it. And can we go another slide? I have one or two more examples of this. So I guess I kind of already said this, but yeah. So this is probably the most striking example in the guidance document. There's a whole section called examples of general wellness products that are not medical devices and examples where they are medical devices, but we don't intend to enforce the requirements. And there's no distinction between the two. And so example number 5 basically is like a step monitor type. Actually, no, it's a pulse rate monitor. So this is an interesting example, but I guess the point here is FDA in this example, or in this guidance document, is not even going to go there and say whether this is a device or not. They're just saying we're considering this a low risk general wellness product, and we're not going to regulate it, basically. Okay, so this next slide is this is a graphic that my colleague developed, which covers more software stuff. But basically, it's showing that there is a gray area here. There's some products that are not medical devices that are software. There's some that may be, but aren't being enforced. And then there's some, basically, as you go from low risk on the left to high risk on the right, FDA gets more and more interested. Really low risk would be, software that helps the hospital with administrative functions, clinical decision support software, so softwares that are basically a part of diagnosing a condition. Those tend to be regulated as medical devices, but I did leave out, there's a whole flowchart thing on clinical decision support. Happy to, talk about that more if that's an area of interest, but it's very niche, so I'm gonna skip that. Can we jump to the next slide? Okay, so I'm kind of cutting to the chase here on the smartwatch. So the smartwatch itself, is it, actually, I think it's kind of, maybe we should just show, we just advance to, there we go. So yeah, that's good. Let's stop here. So the smartwatch itself, I actually had to ask my colleagues. I was like, I don't think I have this right. So our position is this: the smartwatch itself, like the technology wearing the smartwatch, like the physical smartwatch, is a general computing platform. It's measuring stuff from your body and from your movements. It's effectively it's not a device, medical device. And we say effectively because those functions alone, doing that measuring and displaying, it falls under general wellness unless it's doing something more than that. So it's effectively not a device. Next, let's do if the app had a step monitor in it, that falls under general wellness. It's effectively not a device. And that's kind of covered in that previous example I showed. So let's, just leave it here, please, because I think this is one we can talk through. So what if the smartwatch has a feature where it will notify the user of irregular rhythm in their heart rate? So this is an actual description of this. So analyzes pulse rate data, identify episodes of irregular heart rhythms, suggestive of atrial fibrillation, which is a medical condition. But it also says, along with the user's risk factors, this feature can be used to supplement the decision of AFib screening. There's another clause that says this does not diagnose AFib by itself. So let's poll the group. Who thinks this is a medical device function? Okay, seeing some yeses. Any no's, like maybe saying it doesn't diagnose by itself?
Yeah, I would say yes, but the way you were stressing that makes me suspect the answer might be no.
I should have put the text in here. I ran out of space. Half a device, yeah. Okay, so let's advance. I'll show the answer here. The answer is yes, but it is a gray area. And this is an area of fierce debate right now. You can have a wearables company where you have some functions that tell the user certain things about their bodies, and you might find yourself lawyering up and having a back and forth with FDA on whether you're a device. I had to ask my colleague. Actually, no. You know what? This one I wasn't as concerned about. So something we see a lot in indications for use is sometimes the indication will say, but this isn't, don't make a decision based on this. And I actually, being at FDA, I've experienced a few times where the FDA reviewers will say, well, they may have a clinical reviewer too, who will, a practicing physician, and they'll say, look, you can't just write, don't make a decision based off of this. Inherently, it is going to drive decisions about health. So I think that's the thinking here. Like, if your watch tells you you have an arrhythmia, you're not going to say, well, I shouldn't listen to the watch. The watch says don't listen to it, right? So it is a gray area, but this ended up being regulated as a device function. That said, there's another one that I thought was more nuanced, which is an ECG. So showing electrical signals. I believe EKG would be the same thing, blood pressure even. The current thinking is that showing those information, that is medical device, that makes the product a medical device, even blood pressure, because those measurements inherently are diagnostic. So even if you say don't make a decision based off of this, it may be impossible to just set it aside. I think that's an area of open debate, but
Rob, can I ask
that
a
was
clarifying question about that?
yes.
So I thought most blood pressure monitors are not actually diagnostic on their own. It's like more a trend monitor as well, very much like pulse oximetry, because
Mhm.
pulse oximetry is not diagnostic per se. Like the intended
Yeah,
use is not for diagnosing a disease.
that's a good point. I think they are still regulated as medical devices. I'd have to check on that though. Um, yeah, my and even it could be well. You know, one other thing to clarify is there's a concept in medical device indications for use. Generally, people call them tool claims. So you can you can still have products that are considered medical devices, but they're not. You know, uh, they're providing information that contributes to medical decision making, but it's not a diagnosis.
Hmm.
I think that's still, I think that's still within range. But I would have to double check. I haven't actually looked through and seen, is a pulse oximeter a medical device? I mean, I think so. But yeah, I haven't checked that one specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be. I'm pretty sure. So now a lot of these products, especially the lower risk ones, um, are medical devices, but you don't see any, labeling. You don't hear about them because they're so low risk. Even like a tongue depressor is an example where it actually is a medical device, but you don't have to submit to anything to FDA. They're 510(k) exempt, meaning you can just sell them. You just have to take a couple steps and manufacture them a certain way. So there's a lot of medical products out there that actually are classified as medical devices, but we just don't hear about them much because you can make them and sell them, and you don't need to submit anything to FDA to do that. Well, yeah, I appreciate the question. So just to summarize the takeaways here, determining whether a product is a medical device depends a lot on its mechanism of action and its intended use. Medical devices can come in many different forms, even software. So something that's not even physically tangible can be a medical device. And software and general wellness add complexity to identifying what's a medical device. I'm not an expert in that, but I think I kind of became more proficient in it this morning. It's a really interesting, rich area of study and practice. So it's really fun to put this talk together. So that's everything I have in the main part of the presentation. Yeah, we can hover here. I have some more slides on combination products. I don't think this is really worth going through them unless people have specific questions on them.
Yeah, we're at 3:50, so it's probably good to take questions. And if any questions fit really well with those hidden slides, let me know.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I just have a comment also on you said that, even a tongue depressor is a medical device. I remember um, there being like a minor controversy I was hearing a few years ago among people that were selling reusable menstrual pads and were complaining about that being technically a class 1 medical device, which of course is also uh, exempt. Um, but they were like, well, why is this a medical device at all? Whereas on the other hand, you do want to make sure the product that you're selling that's going to be in an intimate area is going to be safe. But there was sort of a culture clash of people who were
Mm-hmm.
very into sustainable reusable products, all which I think kind of should go together with making sure that your products are safe, but they sort of felt this tension between them and the medical establishment. And they're like, well, this is the, medicalization of women's bodies. And so I thought that was just sort of an interesting cultural exchange that might be relevant here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best to comment on that. Uh, but yeah, I think there is a constant clash in general between sort of I think just interest in better, personal care and regulation of that. And a lot of it's reactionary. Sometimes it's, what's going on politically at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've seen FDA, sometimes they will decide to regulate less. Like software is a great example where FDA kind of, Congress jumped through some hoops and FDA jumped through some hoops to reduce regulation of software functions, because people wanted to use these softwares, and so if they did nothing, then everything would be regulated, and you wouldn't have any of these apps on your watch to check out your pulse oximetry, for example. We also see for patient contacting devices. I'm in biocompatibility, which is a technical area within a medical device, but we see a lot of frustration when products that are used by the consumers themselves suddenly get all this extra scrutiny, you have to do all this extra work, when just from a common sense perspective, they're perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm.
A great example is like if you look at clothing, for example. So your average T-shirt will fail biocompatibility testing. So if you have a T-shirt and then you add a medical claim, or we have, there's defibrillator vest, for example, so you can wear or even worn, just devices that are worn, will often have a fabric component, and then suddenly FDA is giving a hard time because the fabric is not, could kill cells in a dish.
Sure.
So there's no good answer to that. It's a huge problem, honestly. And, as a biocompatibility subject matter expert, I'm often saying, we got to find, let's go case by case and find ways out from a regulatory perspective. Because if we go and test this thing, it's going to fail the testing, but
Sure.
It's just as safe as anything else. I think I have a similar feeling in my just intuition on like reusable menstrual pad, the example.
Yeah.
But I think there's also something else with that. I think there was a problem with tampons that led to a guidance document. And so menstrual pads might have gotten sucked up in that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. So Cora was raising their hand first. Cora, do you want to verbalize or just read out? Shall I read it?
Yeah, I think one of my questions is easier said verbally than in chat.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to clarify, in terms of the definition and regulation of a medical device, you were talking about like to what degree does a specific metric become diagnostic inherently versus is it like a promise from a marketing standpoint? And to me, I think it also might change the issue to how it's presented to the user, right? Like most smartwatches, like Apple Watches, aren't going to show you a raw EKG graph or ECG graph, but they might give you an image of a beating heart that might be representative of like how many beats per minute you have. And so I was curious if there's any nuance in what information is collected versus how it's presented to the user, or is all ECG derivative information considered like a medical device? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And actually, I think the answer is, FDA is intentionally vague on this so that way each review team can kind of make their own decision. Like I would probably disagree with, we didn't have time to verify this, but, is blood pressure, for example, showing blood pressure, does that make this a medical device? I think no. I think, I don't know. To me, it just doesn't. It seems like maybe there's a common sense that that's not diagnostic by itself. I mean,
It's also
for
contextual, right? Like the blood pressure of a healthy patient might be different than somebody who has an underlying condition where blood pressure is actually like a major indicator for, I don't know, some other metric that might be more important for their health, right?
Yeah, it's a great comment that, there's no medical history context in showing the metric, by itself. And so, is it inherently protected that, like, what am I trying to say here? Basically, is it fundamentally not diagnostic until you have more information? Well, at the end of the day, I think there is no flow chart. Well, I'm not aware of a true flow chart here. I think that this is something pretty common to FDA. The review teams often like to take discretion. So, like the cardiovascular review team, for example, might take a heavy hand and say, any kind of showing of an ECG or sorry, it would be EKG for them, like that. An EKG is diagnostic in nature. But it's going to be hard to find that codified anywhere. FDA is very resistant to creating that level of flow chart because they want to maintain their ability to make case by case decisions. I mean, it's not unlike the challenges that say the Supreme Court has. FDA is often trying to be vague so they can not create new precedent or so they can maybe change their mind on something.
And that goes into, we have another question in the chat from Jasmine. Jasmine, would you like to read your question, or should I just read it off of the chat?
Doesn't matter. You can read it.
All right. Yeah, so she asked, how have definitions changed, if at all, since the new administration?
Yeah, for that one, I don't think the definitions have changed. There can be pressure from an administration, kind of indirect pressure, or sometimes direct pressure, to be less strict or regulate less. Let's see here. Yeah, there's definitely nuance. I mean, I don't think it's changed the definition, but one of the main tools that we often see used is enforcement discretion, meaning FDA is going to say, like for that software example, for example, where FDA would say for general wellness products, we don't even care if it's a medical device. If it falls in these criteria, we're not going to enforce medical device rules. So that's, I think, where we've seen in general FDA. I wouldn't say cave to pressure per se. I mean, sometimes it's the administration, sometimes it's just public opinion, or maybe it's their own opinion. They feel like they're just stifling innovation. So I haven't actually seen that much change in kind of like the overall regulation. Seen a lot of talk, but when you come down to, are more products being considered not medical devices? I don't think so. I haven't really seen that. That could change, but not yet.
And then the second half of her question was, do IFUs/claims have to work on some percentage of patients for them to be true or verifiable by the FDA? She can expound verbally if needed.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, high level. So there's kind of two parts to this. There are some claims that are grandfathered in, which is kind of interesting, where, as long as you meet XYZ criteria, you can say this because your competitor says this, and this is kind of already just out there. And that contrasts with, there are some claims that FDA will say, no, we need a clinical study. You can't write this. Like, I'm trying to think of a good one. I think maybe for bone void fillers, antimicrobial or osseointegration claims maybe is one. So like, if you're saying that the healing is going to happen a certain way, or you're protective against certain kinds of infections, a lot of times that will require extensive data. I mean, but overall, FDA is not totally consistent on this. So sometimes the way to know if a claim is a big deal is to ask someone who has experience with those kinds of claims at FDA. Some is very review team dependent too. I remember at FDA saying, hey, I think there's an issue with this labeling, and then being told, yeah, we know, but that's just, we got bigger fish to fry. That's been a problem for like 20 years. So review teams kind of prioritize, when they decide which claims to go after.
I have more to ask about that, but I know we're supposed to adjourn. So if there's an opportunity for me to just talk after the recording ends or whatever, that would be great.
Sure. How about I will give the quick promo for next week, which I just put in the chat that next week we have Dr. Mats Forssell, CMU person, to talk about early prototyping and experimentation. So this is Tuesday the 16th at 3, same Zoom link. If you're not on our mailing list yet, join our mailing list. I only send like 2 emails per week. And I will be putting this recording up as an unlisted video on YouTube, and then I'll send an email when I have that up. So thanks to everyone who's attended. And yeah, feel free to log off. And Rob, if you're able to stick around for a few more minutes to talk, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed giving the talk, and thanks for bearing with me on the technical issues. That was totally on my side, but
glad we got it worked out.
Yeah, thank you very much. I can stay on for a few minutes. Jasmine, did you want to continue your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people opportunity to leave if they wanted. Yeah, so I'm thinking about certainly with biologics drugs, there's some percentage of people that something might not work on. So say you can prevent gingivitis with some mouthwash or whatever. Maybe that works for 70% of people, but not everyone. And so that claim might be verifiable through data, but it feels like with devices, there's a lot more like certainty, like this will retract your chest open or something, like if you have a physical device. And so just to fully disclose, I've had like a pre-sub meeting with the FDA before for a small, easy, hopefully exempt device. It might be class 2 because it's relying upon EEG, but I'm wondering, if, for example, EEG only works on a particular portion of people with certain like hair types or scalp types or whatever. What does the FDA do in those cases where it might not work on, it might work on, 95% of people, but not the other 5? Or in the case of EEG, like if you have a certain hair type, it actually might not work on the global majority. Does the FDA have some type of ruling or thought about this? And it feels like with a cosmetic, for example, you might be like, oh, this potion or whatever works on certain hair types, but not others, and that's kind of included in the claims. But does the FDA have a thinking about this or a guidance on that type of? Does that make sense? I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that does make sense. So generally speaking, now I don't know if this is written anywhere, but we said this in a pre-submission meeting once. You get the indication that you studied. That is, if you're doing, when we're dealing in clinical data. So, if it might be exempt, then you're obviously trying to not need a clinical study. A lot of times you can kind of use the labeling to say this isn't going to work in certain patients, and that's the end of it.
Okay.
So, but I think one of the challenges is, from a marketing perspective, it's disadvantageous to write, a flaw about the product, or, however you want to, a limitation of the product. So we do see kind of some clashing sometimes where FDA will say, if this is 510K device, FDA gets some say over the labeling. They'll say you need to add a statement to your labeling, and we'll see companies say, we don't want to add that statement. We don't think it's necessary. Our competitors don't have it. So it can be a flashpoint with FDA. But generally speaking, my thinking would be to just exclude those patients from being part of the indications for use. So like the indications for use could say, for use in patients. It's kind of an art to craft these statements, but you'd basically carve out that it doesn't work for certain patients, and that might be adequate.
Yeah, and I guess the point of this is of what I'm bringing up is that what happens to that proportion of people who it's not served by? Is there some guidance on, or maybe not guidance, but some announcement that's like, we need people to work on this for this particular group so that it can help for those other people who get excluded.
I see.
Or like, I know I talked to someone who was former FDA as well, and they talked about like the drug development tool program, but is there one of those for devices where you're creating a way to assess how well a device works for a large group of people?
Yeah, there is something called MDDT. What is it? MDTT. I think it's MDDT. So medical device. Well, it's basically medical device tools, and there's a couple of them out there. But where basically the scientific community comes together, and maybe you're developing kind of a simulant. For in this case, maybe it's an in vitro model where you can test out and see if this is going to work for patients with certain skin pigmentation or certain kinds of hair. I think that's something that, historically, FDA has been very interested in those efforts and can facilitate. There's a submission process to get something reviewed as an MDDT. So that's definitely one way to go. But I think maybe another part of your question comment, I do think that it can be a gap where there could be a point to say, well, these indications are incorrect because this product doesn't work for certain patients.
Yeah, for up to maybe 40% of the population or more,
Right. For some, I think it might be that it's challenging to, like, there's not a great mechanism to bring that up and to make changes. But I haven't seen in practice that kind of play out.
Well, I think the issue is it would bring up to the manufacturers that perhaps a product doesn't work on people, say, African descent or people with a darker skin color. And that's a big red flag in terms of marketing, because you don't want to put that on your, So I'm just wondering what can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know the answer, but I think there is an example with pulse oximeters. I think that there was a documented issue that came to light during COVID, right? So I think that's probably a good case example. But
did the FDA have a response to that? Because I remember the media attention, and there's a lot of papers, and some of my work has piggybacked off of that, but I don't know if there's any government.
I don't know about official response, but I do know that there is a paper out, I think last year, by a research group at the FDA that was working on a better improved finger phantom for at least modeling this and testing it. So they had like a flexible phantom with a blood channel in the middle, and then they could put an epidermis layer of. So there is at least some work going on at the FDA working on this, but like I don't know how much that has changed with the current government, because the paper I'm thinking about was from last fall.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a great find. I don't have any other insight, unfortunately. I think it's an important issue that is not getting enough attention. So certainly commend efforts, looking into that and developing. Working on that further. But we have seen, just in general, I've been in some conversations at FDA where there's definitely acknowledgement that there are some gaps in the system, and generally speaking, I think it's kind of hard to claw something back after it's already out there. The way that FDA is set up, so that's another major challenge for kind of things getting grandfathered in. It takes a lot generally to change that after it's approved and has a claim.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, well, thank you so much for your insights. I'll look up the MDDT program or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I saw it in my little Google search. And thanks, Robbie. I did find that paper that you were talking about.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was just thinking it would be helpful if I actually dug it up, but you found it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a science forum from the FDA.
Oh, fantastic.
All right.
Well, I apologize. I have to get going now. So for those that stayed on, my email is in the presentation, and Robbie, feel free to share it if anyone wants to follow up with me.
Sure. Yeah, I will pass that on to the So thanks so much for your talk.
Very welcome. This is a pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks. Take care.
Have a good day.